obfuscation, $3 million was wired to Rob Walker's account on March 1st. Actually, they sent two wires. The first wire got kicked back, and then they sent a second wire on March 1st, 2017 to Robinson Walker LLC. And then, as your committees walked through today, they parsed that out to the Biden family in numerous different payments.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it is clear that Joe Biden is the common element in all of Hunter Biden's attempts to do business with China. There's a pattern emerging that the Biden family and associates, including Joe Biden himself, deliberately chose personal gain over the safety and best interest of the very Americans Joe Biden was elected to serve, protect, and defend. With that, I'll yield the balance of my time to Mr. Gates.
Hunter Biden's deposition. Question. Do you think some of your business associates we've spoken about today, Mr. Archer, Mr. Bobulinski, Mr. Galanis, do you think they had an expectation that your dad had any role or involvement in any of your joint business dealings? Answer from Hunter Biden. Not an expectation from me. There was never a single time I can remember saying, hey, we'll get my dad involved. Hey, let's get my dad on the phone. Hey, let's, what can we get out of dad for this? Mr. Galanis, what's your reaction to that testimony from Hunter Biden in light of you describing the Biden lift?
I think it's patently false. It's belied by emails, and I think that there's documentation that says that that's just an untruthful statement.
And what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Galanis, is there you are sitting in a prison cell for a financial crime where you were an associate with Hunter Biden and some of the other players there, and they're out enjoying Southern California, and you're sitting in a prison cell, and they've got the ability to come and give this false testimony to Congress. Is it your belief that the Biden...
Before I recognize Mr. Waltz, for what purpose does Mr. Biggs seek recognition?
I want to include an article in a record. The article is entitled, Tlaib renews her, quote, impeach the MFer, close quote, call against Trump.
Without objection to order, for what purpose does Mr. Gates seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the press release from the Department of Justice. Lev Parnas sentenced to 20 months in prison for campaign finance, wire fraud, and false statement offenses.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Waltz from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I find it incredibly rich Mr. Swalwell is going to come to this committee and lecture us about how China penetrates our government. I think that's something he may know a thing or two about, but let's talk about how China has penetrated the highest levels of this government, including this president and this White House, because I think the visual is incredibly important. Mr. Bobulinski, Hunter Biden portrayed Chairman Yi, the chairman of CEFC, to Jim Biden as a protege of Xi. Is that accurate?
Not only is it accurate, and it wasn't just Hunter Biden, it was James Gilliar, Rob Walker. I wouldn't have used the word protege. They just basically,
You don't run China's largest state-owned energy company without being close to Chairman Xi.
Correct.
Right, fair enough. And by the mid-2000s, Chairman Ye ran a business empire estimated, as much as you can estimate a Chinese state-owned enterprise, tens of billions, including, and from a national security standpoint, this is the critical piece here, including implementing China's Belt and Road Initiative, not just all over the world, right here in the United States. Is that accurate?
100%. So CFC was effectively the shadow arm of the Chinese government, deploying tens of billions of dollars around the world, very well documented. At its peak, I think it was doing $50 billion of revenue per year, one of the top 5 largest.
Debt diplomacy, where they are taking electrical grids, they are bribing officials, they take as collateral, not just grids, ports, airports, key infrastructure that the Chinese government could then leverage and use against any country, but also here in the United States. I mean, that's how the Belt and Road Initiative works. Heck, I was just in the Armed Services Committee with the commander of Indo-PACOM, our Pacific Command, talking about how China is basically gobbling up infrastructure around the world, including here. So by the mid 2015, 2016, Hunter Biden's developed a very lucrative business relationship. By 2017, Hunter Biden forged such a partnership with Chairman Ye that he planned to share an office space with him, and then just removed Vice President Biden at the House of Sweden in Washington, D.C., correct?
Correct.
So here's what's interesting, and building on Chairman Fox's question, within days of him leaving the vice presidency, ostensibly for work performed, $3 million flows through these shell companies that we've depicted here. I mean, you can see how complicated this is, but the key piece is the flow to Hallie Biden, to Jim and Sarah Biden, to Hunter Biden and his various affiliates. And the kicker here, Mr. Chairman, is that we know Hunter is then complaining about paying all his dad's bills. He's complaining to the other relatives saying, you freeloaders, I'm having to use all this money to pay the big guy's bills, house renovations and all kinds of things, correct?
Correct, and it's important for the American people to understand the $3 million was $3 of $20 million that the Bidens expected to be paid for the work in 2015 and 2016.
Mr. Chairman,
and that's not just my word, that is documented.
that's all documented, bank records, text messages, emails. Mr. Chairman, Bob Menendez's wife can't get paid by the Egyptians and then provide that money over to pay Goldbar Bob's, Senator Menendez's bills. I can't have my daughter get paid by, I don't know, Kazakhstan, Russia, and China and then pay my bills. And we know also that they had commingled funds with the Vice President of the United States. When we talk about crimes, let's talk about the crimes. We know he perjured himself. That's a crime. We know he was acting as a foreign agent. And was he registered under FARA? Was he registered as a foreign agent?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was his dad complicit in him acting as a foreign agent through meetings and dinners and what have you? That's crime.
100%.
That's crime number two. He was clearly acting in that capacity. We have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and we already have them thanks to the work of this committee for tax evasion. So, Mr. Chairman, there are multiple crimes that this committee has established ample evidence. We must move to impeachment. We cannot allow this to stand. And I look forward to seeing those references to the Department of Justices. For this alone, this is a critical national security issue. The Chinese Communist Party call it the princelings. They don't go after the principle they want to influence. They go through the sun. And it is right out of their playbook. And they've done it at the highest levels of the United States government. I yield my time.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of UC requests, if that's all right. One is from Devin Archer's transcribed interview testifying that Joe Biden had nothing to do with any of Devin Archer's business ventures with Hunter. Second is the declassified intelligence community assessment from the National Intelligence Council, March 2021, detailing efforts by Russian actors to interfere in the 2020 U.S. elections. And finally, most importantly, the U.S. District Court decision from the Southern District of New York in United States versus Galanis, where Mr. Galanis was described as a con artist who wanted to be in business with Hunter Biden but never was, and how they thought that they could add layers of legitimacy to their con operation. If I could have those introduced.
Without objection, so ordered. Now the chair recognizes Mr. Gates from Florida.
You're a serious business person, Mr. Bobulinski, right?
I am.
Unlike the convicted felon next to you, you've served in the military, right?
Correct.
You've done big deals,
Correct.
complicated deals, deals that involved foreign businesses, right?
Correct.
And so what I'm trying to figure out is when you came to realize that you showed up at the wrong party. Because you kind of strike me as a guy who showed up to do a legitimate business deal and you ended up instead at a bribe. And so as you're looking at CEFC, as you're having this meeting with Joe Biden, as Hunter Biden is introducing you to his web of contacts, when did you go from serious businessman Tony Bobulinski working to make a buck in a capitalist system to a guy worried that you had been unwittingly ensnared into Hunter and Joe Biden's bribe operation with the Chinese Communist Party?
I appreciate the question. It wasn't an aha moment. It was more of a process. I am a serious businessman, demonstrated by the different deals I've done around the world and the success of them. But it started, remember, the Biden family wasn't my entry into this. James Gillier, who I'd known for over 10 years, who traveled the world doing business, kept trying to get me involved. I really had no interest. I sat down in the spring of 2017 to walk through things, and then I quickly put together two businesses, Sinohawk and Oneida. After the meetings in Los Angeles with Hunter and Joe Biden, it started to sort of, bells and whistles started to go off when Jim Biden used the term plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability is the first moment, straight from the lips of Jim Biden, right on the heels of your discussion with Joe Biden, where you start to think, this might not be legit.
Correct. And my lawyers at the time could attest to that because I reached out to them saying, listen, I'm a former naval officer. I held a Q security clearance. I couldn't collect, somebody couldn't take me to dinner for $50. This just does not make sense to me.
But you proceed, and then later this thing starts to get a lot uglier. What's the moment you go from, okay, your spidey senses are up, you're analyzing this, to now you know this is a crime that you are bearing witness to?
The end of July, when the Biden family put them right front and center in the middle of a $9 billion transaction between the Russian state-owned energy company Rosneft and CFC, a surrogate for the Chinese Communist Party.
And was there ever a time in the deals you were involved in where you started to see the money move around the legitimate business enterprise and toward the pockets of the Bidens?
Well, the challenge, Mr. Gates, with that is at the time they moved the money, right? You guys have the text messages where Hunter Biden shook down Director Zhang, but I was not aware of that. I spent a year asking questions of, this doesn't make sense to me, where's the money? I stepped in and had lawyers work to dissolve the two entities. I didn't know till years later that they had defrauded me, they had gotten paid all this money, and all this craziness. The amount of facts,
it just seems pretty simple. This is either a bribe or a business.
it was a bribe from the Chinese Communist Party.
And
I don't say that lightly. There's 1,200 pages, 8 days of testimony in the Southern District of New York. I encourage everyone watching me, hearing me say this, they're publicly available. Go read them. Our Department of Justice outlines in intimate detail the corruption and bribes that CFC was deploying to political officials all over the world.
It wasn't
so
just in
I'm
the
here
United
to believe that they did this in every other country, but with the Biden family, it was pristine. It was an actual clean business. That's absurd.
And you came to know that, and that's when you blew the whistle, right? That's when you started to get worried when you saw Joe
I
Biden.
stepped away from it. There's the whistleblowers. I can't give them kudos enough for the bravery and the risk they put their family in. They publish stuff where I am voicing the concern of the Rosneft deal.
And you animated your concerns when you saw that this wasn't just a corrupt bribe, a corrupt business deal happening to a guy who used to be vice president. When you see that Joe, everyone's made a big deal like you're a bad guy that you showed up at the debate, or you're trying to give life to these facts that you've observed, that it's so bad that you did that during a political contest. But observing this, it kind of seems like it would be unpatriotic for you to stay quiet.
Of course.
And so, I mean, Joe Biden running for president clearly motivated the Chinese to consummate this bribe. Did it also motivate you?
Well, I didn't want to go public. I wanted to simply unload all the facts, personal experiences. It's funny, there's 18 people on this committee with law degrees, including, I think, Mr. Swalwell. Evidence, firsthand testimony, is the most powerful evidence you have. I've given it, Mr. Galanis has given it, along with a whole host of other witnesses. Then, on top of that, I have thousands of documents and pages of legals and stuff like that.
That's what's
I
interesting,
wanted to
Mr.
simply
Bobulinski.
give this information.
Yeah. That's
Congressmen
the
and
thing.
senators.
No one
and let them
questioned
do
any
their
of your
job.
facts. No one brought a single piece of evidence that even for a moment discredited any of the truthful testimony that you've given us.
No, they
my
did
time's
not.
expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes our questioning. Again, want to thank the witnesses. We are going to close now, and I will yield to the ranking member for a brief closing statement.
Great, and I'll take an extra 32 seconds as Mr. Gates did. Well, and while we're on Mr. Gates, he seemed to be upset about a couple different things. One was fraud, which was fascinating to me, given that his hero, Donald Trump, has just been convicted civilly of bank and insurance fraud in New York in a civil case, and now owes, I think it's $454 million, unless that's gone up with interest. I think he's having a hard time making that, but I'm sure that Mr. Gates's constituents will help him out as they're shaking down Republican voters. You can pay either for Donald Trump's criminal lawyers or his civil lawyers. That's the big political choice, I suppose. He's also upset about China. Well, if you check out the Democrats' report, White House for Sale, how princes, prime ministers, and premiers paid off President Trump, you'll find that China actually gave more than $5 million to Donald Trump while he was president of the United States in direct violation of the Emoluments Clause, which says that nobody in federal office shall accept a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office, or title of any kind whatever from a king, a prince, or foreign state. And we spent the day, again, jawboning about Hunter Biden, who has never held public office, and he's never done business with a government. And yet, we have right in front of us, in front of our very eyes, mammoth corruption, unprecedented U.S. history by Donald Trump as president, and my friends don't say a single word about it, but he wants to lecture Mr. Parnas about the illegal donations he made on behalf of pro-Trump super PACs. I've noticed something interesting with the people who have finally disenthralled themselves and gotten out of the Trump cult, as Mr. Parnas puts it. People like Michael Cohen, Sarah Matthews, Cassidy Hutchinson, Alyssa Griffin. There's articles about them. There are dozens of those people, and I'd be fleeing for the exits now too. What's so fascinating to me about it is that they don't mind when these people lie for Donald Trump. Then when they get out and start telling the truth, that's when they call them liars for what they did when they worked for Donald Trump. Mr. Parnas, they're not mad that you lied and went to prison for it and did your time. They're mad that you stopped lying for Donald Trump.
Absolutely, Congressman Raskin.
So, when I was a state assistant attorney general, Mr. Chairman, I saw a judge on my very first day of work castigate a lawyer by saying, "Son, you forgot the very first rule of lawyering. When you go to court, you got to bring the evidence with you. You forgot to bring the evidence. There's no evidence. Hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, dozens of hours of testimony, but not a shred of evidence of presidential wrongdoing, much less an impeachable offense by President Biden. And you're making not just the majority a laughingstock, the whole committee a laughingstock. So it's hurting us. My members are saying, when will they call off this nonsense? So here we are. Again, Mr. Parnas, I want to thank you. You have explained to America that the allegations at the very foundation of this inquiry were predicated on Russian propaganda and disinformation, just as they were at the start of the hit job that you and Rudy Giuliani were sent to do back in 2018 and 19. And I want to thank you for showing America what real intellectual honesty and personal honesty look like, and how you can grow out of the deranged Trump syndrome that so many of our colleagues are still suffering from today. It's time to call this investigation for what it is. Law. We should be spending our time standing up for democracy and not tarnishing it with spectacles like this. I yield back.
Should have brought my waiters from the farm. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Bobulinski, Mr. Galanis have delivered testimony in front of the American people directly implicating President Biden and his family's influence peddling schemes. Schemes that brought over $24 million into the Biden family and their business associates' pockets. For what? I never heard the minority say what they did or what business the Bidens were in. Mr. Bobulinski and Mr. Galanis have provided documents supporting these claims and provided hours of testimony to this committee. Mr. Bobulinski and Mr. Galanis have not changed their stories. Mr. Bobulinski and Mr. Galanis did not ask for this hearing, but they showed up for it because they have nothing to hide. I also invited Hunter Biden to this hearing, in part due to his own request that he be allowed to provide transparency and testimony before the American people. Or at least he did request this hearing, and then he sat for a deposition with the Oversight and Judiciary Committees. Now he's nowhere to be found. Mr. Bobulinski, Mr. Galanis, and others have implicated Joe Biden in the Biden family business. Hunter Biden denies his father's role in the Biden family business. This is a material discrepancy among witnesses of the highest order. I attempted to solve this problem by getting the witnesses in the same room together to straighten out any misunderstandings. It should be clear to the American people that Hunter Biden's word is as valuable as the fake services he was selling. And this committee will not play games or belittle the institution of Congress by allowing Hunter Biden to call the shots about who he testifies with or when he does it. At this point, the only person who can resolve this discrepancy about Joe Biden's participation in his family's influence peddling schemes is Joe Biden himself. As I said at the beginning of this hearing, Joe Biden was either used by his family over and over again and paraded in front of his business partners to rake in millions of dollars, or he knew exactly what he was doing to enrich his family. Joe Biden was either complicit or incompetent. And the American people deserve to know which one it is, which one it was. But neither is acceptable for the leader of the United States. I don't think anyone believes that this is acceptable behavior for the family of the President of the United States to receive tens of millions of dollars from our adversaries around the world, and they can't say one single thing they did to receive the money. Nobody supports that. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, if you're from a big city or a small town. That's not what this democracy is about. That's not what the founding fathers set up. They set this up that we have public servants come